I share your concerns that the Iranians are playing for time. Over the past 18 months, we have been moving closer to their positions on all key elements, on the Iraq reactor, on Fordo, on enrichment, and on Iran's disclosure of the military dimensions of its nuclear program. And I think we need to review how we got to this point. Iran, over the course of 20 years, deceived the international community and violated not U.S., but UN Security Council resolutions to arrive within weeks of achieving nuclear breakout capacity. And Iran came to the table only after the cumulative impact of years of sanctions began to affect the regime's economic and political stability. For us to give up the leverage of sanctions, which would take years to reimpose, we need a deal that truly reverses their nuclear program rather than just buying a little time. This is why I'm concerned about more than breakout time. I'm concerned the agreement won't provide a clear picture of the military dimensions of Iran's program, which are critical to understand, to know how far down the road they were as it relates to weaponization, so that we understand the time frames of any breakout capacity vis-a-vis weaponization, so that we know just how close Iran is to being able to make a nuclear weapon. And I'm concerned that instead of dismantling and closing Iraq and Fordo, as we were told was going to be the case at the beginning of these negotiations by the administration, the Iraq reactor will now be converted to some form, and Fordo, a facility built under a mountain, which I don't think you do for civilian purposes, will be repurposed. After 18 months of stalling, Iran needs to know that there will be consequences for failure. Now, some of us believe those consequences should be additional sanctions. While we are playing nice, however, Iran is playing an asymmetrical game, violating, in my view, the spirit and intent of sanctions. In November, Iran violated the interim agreement by feeding uranium gas into its IR-5 centrifuge at the Natanz research facility. The issue of whether this was a violation of the interim agreement is only an issue because, at the time of the interim agreement, the IR-5 had not been used for enrichment, and hence the agreement only prohibited Iran from making advances on the IR-6. That is spin, if I've ever heard it. But in any case, the action clearly violated the intent of the agreement to halt enrichment advances at Natanz, and it violated IAEA and UN Security Council resolutions. And it's interesting to note, as we're talking about verification agreements, should we be able to get an agreement, that it was a group of scientists outside of the administration that noticed this and were the ones to inform the administration about it. So that makes me worried about our verification processes moving forward. In December, the UN panel of experts that monitors sanctions compliance said in a report that Iran has been illicitly trying to buy technology for the Iraq research reactor, which, as originally designed, would produce plutonium for a bomb, and has been referred to by experts as a bomb-making factory because of the quantity of plutonium output. Under the interim agreement, Iran agreed to make no further advances in the construction at Iraq. Iran's position is that any purchases alone would not contravene the agreement, only new construction. Well, if you believe that, I have a reactor to sell to you. And just last week, Iranian President Rouhani announced the construction had begun on 2 new nuclear reactors at Bushehr. While not a technical violation of the joint plan of action, the announcement is clearly intended to leverage further gains in the negotiation. And the very next day, the Iranian regime announced that Washington Post correspondent Jason Rezaian, who has been in prison for 178 days, had been referred to the Revolutionary Court that handles sensitive national security cases. As the Washington Post said in a recent editorial, it's difficult to avoid the conclusion that Mr. Razan is being used as a human pawn in the regime's attempt to gain leverage in the negotiations. So we have this whole alternate track that the Iranians can cheat on, but because it's technically not in the joint plan of action, well, we don't call them on it. That's a great opportunity if you can get it, that you can advance your interests outside of the JPOA and quote-unquote not violate the JPOA. So let me close by saying Iran is clearly taking steps that can only be interpreted as provocative. Yet the administration appears willing to excuse away any connection between these developments and signs of Iran's bad faith in negotiations. It seems that we are allowing Iran to shuffle the deck and deal the cards in this negotiation, that we're playing dealer's choice. Frankly, that's not good enough. We need to get into the game. Now, up until now, Iran has not been motivated sufficiently to make tough decisions. And I hope there will be an agreement in March. But I also believe we need to make clear that there are consequences to no deal or to a bad deal, as Senator Corker is referring to, and I'm intrigued by his most recent concepts of his legislation. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding the hearing, and I look forward to hearing from our witnesses.